Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to be talking a little about Stephen Paddock and the horrible shooting in Las Vegas last week. And there was a lot of discussion about whether or not it's the right time to talk about gun control immediately after the event. It seems to be consistent with a regular terrorist attacks, if you want to call it that, that we've seen in Europe in particular, or even in our own 9/11 here in the United States. The talk of Osama bin Laden being responsible for the 9/11 attacks came up pretty quickly that morning. So it's not inappropriate to talk about gun control immediately after 59 people are killed and hundreds others injured. So let's talk about the Second Amendment and what it actually says. It says a well-regarded militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I think it's also important. It says being necessary to security of a free state. That would tend to, at least in my humble opinion, include the prospects of gun control. When we look at when the First Amendment was first enacted, late in the 18th century, the amount of ammunition, riflery, weaponry was pretty small compared to the kind of arsenals that are available today. Absolutely. The government would have similar arms to what the private citizen could attain. Today, we have automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, and I'm not an expert in weaponry, so I'm not even going to try to go down that road. But I have enough ability to reason that these type of weaponry are not suitable for the security of a free state. And they do quite the opposite. They create insecurity and they create death. That's what we saw in Sandy Hook. That's what we saw in Orlando. And that's what we saw recently in Las Vegas and other places as well. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Do we really need to have an arsenal that matches what the government has? I don't think many people would agree with that. Even semi-automatic weapons, is that something that we need as a people to secure ourselves? We have to also realize that in the 21st century, that our weapons that are available to us, as sophisticated as they can be, and as small as they can be, the type of weaponry that Stephen Paddock had at his disposal still cannot compare to the arsenal that the government has, whether it's police forces or the U.S. military. So there's no way a citizen can defend themselves against the United States government, practically speaking. So that can be shelved, that argument. The right of people to have a handgun, let's say, is a very reasonable right for Americans to have, and I support that. I personally don't have a firearm. I don't believe I need to, mainly because I live outside of New York City. We have a police force that ensures our security. Now, if you live in some of the more remote parts of America, even places not too far from where I live, police calls may be delayed quite a bit. And so if you're in a situation where you defend yourself against either an assailant or someone who's threatening you on your property, it seems reasonable that those people should have the right to bear arms for their protection. And that seems reasonable to me. So what are we going to do about securing this Second Amendment, having a a Second Amendment upheld, and what are we going to do about the violence that comes from the use of weapons? This is something that we need to ask ourselves, and it's going to be different whether you live in New York City, whether you live in a suburban area like where I do. It's going to be very different if you live in a place like Alaska versus Washington, D.C. There's going to be a lot of local and state input in those decisions, and citizens need to participate in that discussion, either online or through participating in public hearings about these matters. We need to have more people participating in that discussion. We can't just leave it to so-called experts that come on TV news and give their analysis. It needs to be a broader participation in this discussion, because it is something that we have a constitutional right to have, bear arms, and yet we can see the negative outcomes that result from that. Just a little history of policing, and we've had police forces. First New York City police force started in 1845. We've had NYPD ever since. It began to grow after that, of course, so that every local community, most local communities have a police force, and again, the right to bear arms is still there, but the need to has been reduced when you have a police force that acts on behalf of protecting the security of its citizens. And how can you praise the police, the men and women in blue, in one breath, and then say, well, we shouldn't give such authority to the police for our protection when it comes to a discussion of gun debates? And most police forces, police chiefs will say, hey, it's time to get a handle on this. There's too many guns out in the street. We need to get a handle on this. 67% of all homicides in America are through firearms. 13,286 people were killed in 2015 as a result of guns. Countless more, of course, injured. 310 million firearms are in the United States right now. Almost identical to the population. That's for every man, woman, and child. Most homicides are obviously people with criminal background. Most law-abiding citizens who have firearms do not use them in a malicious way. But we've seen even responsible gun owners, like in Sandy Hook, can be thwarted by a son who is deranged and takes possession of his mother's guns and goes on a shooting rampage. And so when you look at a state like Connecticut with very strict gun laws, you can see that how they can be ineffective in every scenario. So the question I want to conclude with is, what kind of restrictions do we want to have? And again, when we have more people involved in the comments of those, rather than trying to be partisan on this issue, if we can somehow frame the debate that the Second Amendment's going to stay, at least for now, unless it goes that far. I don't think we have to. But if we frame it that how the Second Amendment is worded, you're having a secure state and a right to bear arms, as it is written. How do we attain that in the 21st century? It can't be the same as it was 50 years, 100 years or when it was first enacted in 1791. That's going to be the question, and trying to balance saving lives, which I think is an extraordinarily important thing to do. And we know that when gun owners protect themselves, they are potentially saving their lives or people they love or friends. So that's how those are the questions that are out there. And to say that it's just a simple question, that one just blanket the whole issue and say no, there shouldn't be any restrictions, or say we should just ban all firearms, and I mean that's not practical either. You're not going to get a consensus on the other side. You're not going to get compromise, and there will be compromise. There has to be. That's always been the American tradition. And in 2017, we need compromise probably more than ever. More than ever. So if you want to make comments on what I've said here today, please do so. I should be having more videos coming up on different topics. And I hope you like this video, and I'll see you again soon.